The air in the Queen's long gallery was thick with the scent of beeswax, old money, and simmering ambition. 100 candles flickered in the gilded sconces, their light dancing across the portraits of monarchs long dead, who seemed to look down with bored disdain upon the living gathering beneath them. It was a reception for the nation's most powerful industrialists, a carefully choreographed ballet of power where the true dancing was done with words, not feet. Lady Elara Vance stood near a towering marble fireplace, a crystal glass of champagne held with a grace that was as much a part of her as the keen intelligence in her sea-gray eyes. At 26, she was the sole heir to the Vance shipping empire, a dynasty built not on land titles but on the sweat of dockworkers and the relentless, salt-scoured hulls of clipper ships. Her gown of deep emerald silk was a deliberate statement in a room awash with pastels, a color of strategy, of money, of the deep, untamable ocean. Her gaze, cool and assessing, swept the room and landed on him. Lord Alistair Finch-Hatton. The name itself was a relic, a string of syllables that evoked rolling estates and fox hunts. He was everything her father had railed against. Old aristocracy, new to commerce, and dangerously charming. He stood surrounded by a coterie of admirers, his laughter a rich, easy sound that cut through the murmur of polite conversation. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-streaked brown hair and a face that seemed carved from the same marble as the fireplace. All strong lines and infuriating confidence. "He's the one to watch, Elara," a low voice murmured at her side. Mr. Sterling, her father's oldest advisor, had a face like a wrinkled navigational chart. The Finch-Hatton family has invested their entire fortune into a new steam fleet. They're desperate for this contract. The Royal Mail Transoceanic contract. It wasn't just a business deal. It was a lifeline, a key to empire. The company that won it would become the undisputed master of the sea lanes, its flags flying on every major route from the chill waters of the North Atlantic to the spice-laden winds of the Orient. For Vance Shipping, it was survival. For Alistair, it was validation. "Desperation makes men careless, Mr. Sterling," Elara replied, her voice barely a whisper. "And careless men drown." As if sensing her scrutiny, Alistair's head turned. His eyes, a startling shade of blue-green like a tropical lagoon, met hers across the crowded room. For a moment, the chatter and the music faded. A challenge was issued and accepted in that single, silent look. A slow, knowing smile touched his lips, and he excused himself from his group, beginning to move toward her with the predatory grace of a stalking panther. "Lady Elara," he said, his voice a smooth baritone that held a hint of mockery. He never used her professional title, a subtle dig he knew she despised. "A pleasure, as always. I trust the dockyards are faring well." Elara offered a smile as sharp as broken glass. "Lord Finch-Hatton, the dockyards are thriving, thank you. We believe in investing in the foundations of our business, not just the gilt on the figurehead. I hear you've launched another steamship. The Firefly, was it? A charming name. One hopes it's more resilient than its namesake." His smile didn't falter, but his eyes narrowed a fraction. "How kind of you to take an interest. The Firefly represents the future, Lady Elara. Speed, reliability, progress. Qualities the Crown will no doubt value over tradition." "Tradition is the bedrock of trust, my lord," she countered, taking a sip of her champagne. "The Crown knows our name. They know our ships have carried their mail for 3 generations without a single loss to negligence. Can your fledgling fleet say the same? Steam is impressive until a boiler bursts in the mid-Atlantic. Sail may be slower, but it is a patient, proven partner to the sea." "The sea has no partners, only conquerors," Alistair said, his gaze intensifying. "And I intend to conquer it. This contract will be mine." "We shall see," Elara said, her tone glacial. "The board of adjudicators is not swayed by a handsome face and an old title. They look at numbers, logistics, security. And on every metric, Vance Shipping is superior." "We'll see about that," he repeated, his voice dropping. He leaned in slightly, close enough for her to catch the scent of sandalwood and brandy on his breath. "I do so enjoy a good competition. It makes the victory so much sweeter." He gave a slight, mocking bow and melted back into the crowd, leaving Elara with a cold knot of fury tightening in her stomach. She had known he would be arrogant, but the sheer, unshakable certainty of the man was galling. He moved through the world as if it were his birthright, while she had to fight for every inch of respect. Later that evening, in the private study of her Mayfair house, surrounded by models of her father's ships and charts of the world's oceans, Elara laid out her battle plans with Mr. Sterling. I want a complete review of our security protocols, she instructed, her fingers tracing a route across a large map of the Atlantic. All documents pertaining to our bid are to be kept in the main safe. Only you and I have the combination. We double the night watch on the offices. I don't trust him. You believe Lord Finch-Hatton would resort to espionage? Mr. Sterling asked, his bushy eyebrows rising. I believe a man who sees the world as his to conquer will use any weapon at his disposal, Elara said, her eyes hardening. This is not a game of cricket, Mr. Sterling. This is war.
The war began in earnest the following week. It was a conflict waged in the financial papers, in the whispers of Clubland, and in the stark columns of ledgers. Elara's first major offensive was a meeting with the head of the Admiralty Board, Sir Reginald Croft. It was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock sharp. She arrived at 9:45, impeccably dressed in a severe navy blue suit, her portfolio containing projections, ship schematics, and a detailed plan for a new, faster route to the Caribbean. She was shown into an antechamber to wait. At 10:15, a flustered clerk appeared. My most profound apologies, Lady Elara, but Sir Reginald has been called away on an urgent matter. An urgent matter. Elara's heart sank. We had an appointment. Indeed, madam. It could not be helped. A personal issue with his steam-powered motor car. Lord Finch-Hatton, who was coincidentally in the vicinity, was kind enough to assist him. They have just left for his mechanic in Greenwich. Elara sat perfectly still, her hands clenched in her lap. A coincidence. Of course. She could almost picture Alistair's smug expression as he kindly assisted the old admiral, stealing her meeting and her time. It was a masterstroke of sabotage, petty yet effective. The retaliation was swift and just as ruthless. Alistair had secured a prime speaking slot at the Royal Geographical Society to present his vision for a steam-powered mail service. The hall was packed with influential backers and press. As he took the stage, confident and charismatic, a stack of handouts was distributed to the audience. But the documents they received were not his polished prospectus. They were early, flawed drafts, filled with scribbled calculations that contained glaring errors, and, most damningly, a margin sketch of a particularly buxom mermaid, clearly doodled by a bored junior engineer during a long meeting. A titter of laughter ran through the crowd, growing into a roar. Alistair, mid-sentence, faltered, his confidence shattered as he looked out at the amused, mocking faces. He didn't need to look to know the source. Only one person had both the motive and the access to his offices to pull off such a humiliating stunt. The battle lines were now drawn in blood. The stakes were raised again when a critical document disappeared from Elara's office. It was not the main bid, safely in the vault, but her private logbook, a leather-bound journal containing her personal observations on their captains, their ship's weaknesses, and her most innovative and proven ideas for streamlining the sorting of mail at sea. Its loss was a violation that felt deeply personal. She confronted Alistair at a dockside warehouse a few days later, where he was inspecting a newly arrived engine part for his flagship, the Peregrine. The air was cold and smelled of brine and coal dust. "You stole my book," she accused, striding into the vast, echoing space, her heels clicking on the stone floor. He turned from the massive, greasy piston, wiping his hands on a rag. There was no mockery in his face now, only a guarded tension. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me." Her voice echoed in the cavernous building. The meeting with Croft was one thing. The Geographical Society was a low blow. But this is beneath even you. "Is it?" he shot back, his own anger surfacing. "You think I'm the only one capable of underhanded tactics? My chief engineer resigned yesterday. It seems a rather substantial sum of money was deposited into his bank account from an account linked to a Vance shipping subsidiary. Coincidence?" Elara stared at him, a cold dread seeping through her fury. She had done no such thing. But the fact that he believed she had, that their competition had escalated to this level of mutual distrust, was terrifying. "I did not bribe your engineer," she said, her voice low and steady. "And you will return my book." "I don't have your damned book," he roared, the sound bouncing off the corrugated iron walls. He took a step toward her, his frame towering over hers. "Do you think this is easy for me? Do you think I enjoy this gutter fight? My family's estate is mortgaged to the rafters, Elara. Every penny, every shred of our reputation, is tied up in those ships." He jabbed a finger toward the dock where the Peregrine was moored. "This isn't a game for me. It's ruin." For the first time, Elara saw past the arrogant nobleman. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the weight of his own legacy pressing down on him just as hers pressed on her. They were two sides of the same coin, trapped by birth and circumstance in a fight to the death. The realization left her speechless. She turned on her heel and walked away, the sound of her footsteps the only thing breaking the heavy silence. The turning point came on a night of relentless pouring rain. A tip, from a source she barely trusted, claimed that a disgruntled former clerk of Finch-Hatton's was willing to sell information. The meeting place was a filthy alleyway in Wapping, a part of London where the fog clung to the cobblestones like a shroud and the shadows had eyes. Elara, disguised in a plain, dark cloak, moved through the downpour, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was madness. But the stolen logbook and the sabotaged meetings had pushed her to a place where madness seemed like the only option. She had to know how deep his treachery ran. The alley was a dead end, stinking of rotting fish and stagnant water. A single, guttering gas lamp cast a wavering pool of sickly yellow light. She waited, the rain soaking through her cloak, chilling her to the bone. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The figure that stepped into the alley mouth was not a disgruntled clerk. It was Alistair. He was without his greatcoat, his shirt plastered to his torso by the rain, his hair dark and dripping. His face was a mask of fury and something else, fear. "You fool," he snarled, striding toward her. "It was a trap. Did you really think I wouldn't monitor the movements of known informants? You walked right into it." Elara's hand went to the small pistol she carried in her pocket. "Stay back." He ignored her, stopping just feet away, his chest heaving. "Why are you here, Elara? To buy lies? To sink me with fabricated evidence?" "I want the truth," she cried out, the rain masking the tremor in her voice. "I want to know what you're capable of." "I am capable of winning," he shouted back, his voice raw. "But not like this. I didn't take your book. And I know you didn't bribe my engineer. Someone else is playing us against each other." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. The thought had occurred to her in her most paranoid moments, but to hear him say it, to see the desperate sincerity in his eyes, changed everything. The carefully constructed image of him as her monstrous rival crumbled, leaving only a man as lost and desperate as she was. "Who?" she whispered. "I don't know," he admitted, his shoulders slumping in exhaustion. "But while we've been tearing each other apart, they've been watching, waiting for one of us to fall." They stood in the pouring rain, two rivals silhouetted in the dim light, the animosity between them dissolving into a shared, dawning horror. The cutthroat competition, the stolen documents, the sabotaged meetings, it had all been a smokescreen. Alistair took a step closer, his gaze searching her face. "I received a note today. It threatened to reveal compromising information about my family's finances to the press if I didn't withdraw my bid. It was signed with your family's seal." "A forgery," Elara breathed. "I would never." "I know," he said, and the simple trust in those two words undid her completely. He was close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the rain droplets caught in his eyelashes. The world narrowed to this alley, to the sound of the rain, to the space between them. All the tension, the anger, the frustration, and the unacknowledged attraction that had simmered between them for months boiled over. It was she who closed the final distance. Or perhaps it was he. Later, neither could be sure. But in that rain-soaked alley, surrounded by the grime and shadows of the city, his lips found hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision, a release of months of pent-up emotion, a furious, desperate, passionate claiming. His hands came up to cradle her face, his touch surprisingly tender against the violence of the kiss. Her fists unclenched, the pistol forgotten, and her hands found their way to his sodden shirt, clutching the fabric as if he were the only solid thing in a world gone mad. It tasted of rain, salt, and the shocking sweet surrender of a battle that had suddenly lost all meaning. When they finally broke apart, gasping for air, the world rushed back in. The rain continued to fall. The gas lamp sputtered. Alistair rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her chilled skin. "This is madness." "Yes," Elara agreed, her voice unsteady. "We can't trust anyone," he murmured. "Except each other," she whispered back. It was a truce. An alliance born not from friendship, but from necessity and a kiss that had changed everything. The following days were a whirlwind of clandestine meetings and shared intelligence. They met in places where no one would think to look for them: a quiet corner of the British Museum reading room, a public park at dawn, a small, smoke-filled coffee house far from the centers of power. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. The sabotaged meetings, the stolen documents, the bribed engineer, all pointed to a third party, someone who stood to gain immensely from both Vance shipping and the Finch-Hatton fleet being discredited. They pored over financial records, shipping manifests, and lists of rival companies. It was Elara who found the connection. "Look," she said, spreading a map out on the table in her private library late one night. Alistair stood beside her, his presence now a comforting, solid force. Every time one of our ships was delayed by mechanical failure or administrative error, a ship from the Ethelred line was there to pick up the cargo. Ethelred. They're a small, aggressive company. They couldn't hope to win the contract on their own merits, but if the two frontrunners destroy each other, the board would be forced to look for a safe, uncontroversial alternative, Alistair finished, his eyes lighting with grim understanding. Ethelred. The owner is Josiah Grimsby, a viper in a waistcoat. I should have known. With their enemy identified, they formulated a new strategy. No longer rivals, they became partners. Elara's meticulous knowledge of logistics and Alistair's innovative steam technology were a formidable combination. They worked through the night, merging their bids into a single, irresistible proposal, a joint venture. The Finch-Hatton Royal Mail Service. It would utilize the reliability and global network of Vance's sailing fleet for certain routes, and the speed of Finch-Hatton steamers for time-sensitive deliveries. It was a vision of the future, a perfect marriage of tradition and progress. The day of the final adjudication arrived. They walked into the wood-paneled boardroom together, a united front. The members of the Royal Mail Board, including a chastened Sir Reginald Croft, looked on in surprise. Josiah Grimsby was there, his weaselly face pale with shock as he saw them side by side. He had expected to pick at the carcasses of their ruined companies. The presentation was a masterpiece. Elara spoke with passion about her family's legacy of trust and safety. Alistair demonstrated the irrefutable efficiency of steam. Together, they presented their joint plan, a comprehensive system that dwarfed anything Ethelred or any other single company could offer. When they finished, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a round of applause. The outcome was never in doubt. The contract was signed with great pomp at St. James's Palace. Elara, in a gown of silver grey, and Alistair, in his formal tailcoat, stood side by side, their hands brushing as they put their names to the document that would bind their futures together. Later, they stood on the balcony of Elara's home, looking out over the Thames, where the ships of their new, combined fleet were moored, their flags flying together under the starlit sky. "It's done," Elara said, a profound sense of peace settling over her. Alistair turned to her, taking both of her hands in his. The arrogance was gone from his face, replaced by a depth of feeling that made her breath catch. "No," he said softly. "It's just beginning." He dropped to one knee on the balcony. The city lights twinkled around them like a carpet of fallen stars. "Elara Vance," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We began as rivals. We became allies. I cannot imagine my future, my life, or my empire without you in it. You are the most infuriating, brilliant, and captivating woman I have ever known. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Elara's eyes, but she smiled, a true, radiant smile that lit up her whole face. The shipping magnate's daughter and the nobleman. The sea and the sky. It was the most unlikely and the most perfect merger of all. "Yes, Alistair," she whispered, pulling him to his feet. "Yes." And as his lips met hers, under the vast, approving canopy of the night, the final remnants of their rivalry melted away, leaving only the promise of a shared destiny, built on a foundation of salt and starlight.